when we begin the story of the emergent story, or Diné, we generally find a story that talks about the place where the four rivers flow in the different directions. With our people, there are stories that we share during the winter time. And right now we do have snow, and it is winter, and a recording of the information that we'll share with you is something that should be shared during this particular season of the year. It is that the story is referred to as the emergent story or the creation story. But in our language, we don't have a word for creation. There's no word for creating. And it is that we have a word that says organize. And so the story, in one particular way, which is only found in the ceremonial prayers and in the ceremonial songs and in ceremonies itself, it talks about the actual organization of Mother Earth, how Mother Earth is actually made up of material that was found in the void by the holy people, and how they put a crystal, Diné is what they call that crystal. It's rock that can be seen through, Diné, and that is in the center of the earth. And then the holy people found all of this material out in the void, and then they enclosed the crystal with layers and layers of different material that they found and brought in to dress Mother Earth with the most precious and the most beautiful material. And this was way before the life form was placed on Mother Earth. And Mother Earth in our language is called Nasa, which is the word, which is the surface that is woman. Nasa. Sometimes they say Nasan, but Nasa is the original way that they refer to it in the ceremonial songs and prayers. But the whole story starts actually with the organizing of life and life forms in what is the first world, and then the journey from the first world to the second world, where the five-fingered being is identified as the children of the holy people. There are other life forms such as vegetation, insect, birds, and animals, and these creatures. And that's the story that sometimes in our own people they get confused and they call it the emergence, which is not correct. If it is in any way to mention the word emerging, it is emerging into life and actual living beings. And so the right way to explain it in the language of our people is inna Nkitahasia, is that life was given to us. And so when you really understand the songs and the prayers, when the story is told about the organizing of Mother Earth and all life forms, it is that it's important to know that the way that it is understood is that we were beings of awareness when we took on a life as a form of life, and we were beings of awareness, and so were the vegetation, insect, birds, and animals, and all life forms took on that sense of awareness. But it is that the awareness actually becomes something that is far greater than what we can say in English, because there are no words for things that we can talk about in English. But now and then I come across words throughout the various languages, like when you say Hajine, In Japanese, there's a word, hajime, which means the first place. But it is in our language, that first place was the first place where life was given to all of the different life forms that we observe today on the surface of Mother Earth. So that's one side of the story. The other story that is very important to our people is the actual arriving from the direction east while we are here in this life form and journeying across the Great Plains to here into the Rocky Mountains, and how our people established a civilization that continued for almost 2,000 years. And it is that these two stories tend to intertwine, and when the telling of the story, there's a lot of it that is the physical evidence is still there. When we begin the story of the emergent story, or Hajine, we generally find a story that talks about the place where the four rivers flow in the different directions, and that the river that flows to the direction south and the direction west, and those are the two rivers, the main river, but the other rivers, there's not too much of a story to them. But that is mainly the starting point of the story as it begins. And I would suggest to anybody that is interested in these stories of the emergence or Hajine. Now, when we look at the story, we have to understand that Hajine sometimes is confused with the idea that our people had bundles of belongings and that they strapped to their back, and they're all moving in a direction, coming from the ground, coming up and up and up. And that is the word that applies to that time when they say that we came from the ground and we came up. But the actual name that we have as we refer to ourselves is Diné, and that means from up, de, and then ne. So it is very important to understand that the first part of the story is telling us about coming from up here where there's no surface to the surface of Mother Earth. And the other one is telling about coming across the Great Plains and finding places of refuge down in the ground, below the ground level, in ravines, and then coming up, and then continue the journey coming west. And so that is where it is very confusing to a lot of people. And as I was going to say, I would suggest when the people hear these stories that they understand that sometimes people get confused in telling the story as it is from the actual first world as to the journeying from the east and coming west. Those are two separate stories entirely. And so it is that we're going to make an effort to share some of these stories. And don't hear it just from one person. Hear it from as many different people as you possibly can. And find a common thread of the information. We here at Navajo Traditional Stories, we consult with a lot of different people. And I myself have heard this story from many different sources, from the old people. And more than 65 years ago, I began listening to these stories, and even 70 years ago that I began listening to these stories as they were told. And there's a lot of things that have not been included in the modern telling of the story of the origin of our people and their journeys and their experiences as they came from either direction east, coming west, or from actually living and being given life in the first world. And those are the stories that we'll share with you and the things that we are told.